Welcome, dear listener. Tonight, I invite you to travel with me to a quiet place along the rocky coast of Maine. The year is 1890, and there, where cliffs meet the sea, a lighthouse stands tall, wrapped in wind and mist. Inside that tower, a man lives alone, and his only companion is the ocean. He wakes before the sun, before the sky turns blue, before the gulls begin to cry, before the world remembers to stir. He rises not with sound, but with stillness and a calm that's been shaped by many years. No alarm calls him, no bell or clock or voice. Only habit and the hush of the sea, pressing through stone and timber, pulling gently at his soul. The blanket folds softly as he sits up. The room is dim, filled with the scent of salt and old pine. Outside, the fog is thick as wool. The sea groans low, rolling in its endless sleep. He places his feet on the floor, wooden boards cold beneath him. The slippers beside the bed wait quietly, their leather edges worn, their shape molded to his step, like the path he walks each day. He stands slowly, pulls on his thick sweater, buttons it all the way to his neck, then walks toward the small round window. There's nothing to see, only white, endless white. Still, he looks, not to see, but to remember that something is always there, beyond the fog, beyond the silence. He moves toward the kitchen. The kettle sits on the old iron stove, waiting for fire. He strikes a match. The flame catches, and the room fills with soft warmth. Coffee brews slowly, steam rising in gentle spirals. The keeper holds the cup in his hands, warming them against the cold air. Outside, the wind picks up, whistling through cracks in the wooden walls. He listens. The foghorn moans in the distance, long and low, a mournful voice calling out to the sea. He drinks his coffee quietly, alone with the sound of the ocean. The coffee finishes, and he sets the cup down carefully. No rush here, only quiet motions practiced many times before. He moves to the door, grasping the iron handle with steady hands. The cold wind rushes in, carrying the sharp scent of salt and seaweed. Stepping outside, the rocky path crunches beneath his boots. The cliffs rise steep and gray, draped in mist that clings like a soft blanket. He walks slowly, each step measured and sure. The lighthouse stands tall behind him, a silent guardian watching the vast ocean. Birds circle far above, their cries distant and faint. The waves crash relentlessly below, carving the stone with endless patience. He reaches the lantern room, climbing the worn spiral staircase. The metal groans beneath his feet, echoing softly in the cold air. At the top, the great glass dome awaits. He wipes away droplets of fog, revealing the brass and glass lens inside. It gleams faintly in the dim light. Carefully, he checks the oil reservoir. The flame that guides sailors must not falter. He refills the oil, wiping the wick clean with practiced hands. The mechanism that turns the lens requires winding. He cranks the handle slowly, feeling the steady resistance as the gears engage. Each rotation ensures the beam sweeps across the water, cutting through darkness and fog alike. Below, the foghorn sounds again, a low, mournful call that reverberates through the cliffs. The keeper listens, nodding slightly, reassured by its steady song. With duties done, he descends the stairs. Pausing briefly at each landing to listen, the lighthouse is alive with quiet sounds. The ticking of the clock, the creak of wood settling, the distant crash of waves. Back in the kitchen, he prepares a simple breakfast: bread and cheese, salted pork, and a small jar of preserves. He eats slowly, savoring each bite. Outside, the fog begins to lift, revealing patches of pale blue sky. The sun remains hidden, but light filters softly through the mist. After breakfast, he steps outside once more. The day is beginning in earnest now, but the world feels still, as if holding its breath. He looks out toward the horizon, watching the ships far away. Some are small fishing boats, their sails barely visible. Others are larger vessels, carrying goods and passengers to distant ports. He thinks of the sailors traveling through treacherous waters. His light guides them, a beacon of hope in the endless dark. For a moment, he closes his eyes, feeling the cool breeze on his face, the salt spray on his lips. This is his world, silent, vast, and eternal. After a while, he turns back toward the tower, boots pressing gently into the damp earth. The wind has calmed, though the mist still dances in the air, curling around the stones like smoke. Inside, the warmth from the stove still lingers. He removes his coat, folding it over the wooden chair by the fire. There is no clock ticking loud, only the rhythm of the sea and the faint creak of the old beams. He sits down at the small wooden desk by the narrow window that faces east. A candle flickers softly beside him, casting a warm glow over the paper. From the drawer, he pulls a thin leather-bound logbook. Its cover is worn, corners frayed from years of quiet use. He opens it carefully, revealing pages filled with looping script. Each line tells of winds, tides, passing ships, and fog. He dips the nib of his pen in ink, steadying his hand before writing. August 4th, 1890. Morning fog thick, visibility less than a mile. 2 schooners sighted eastbound before sunrise. Lens cleaned, oil refilled, horn sounded regularly. He pauses, listening again to the sea, as though asking if he's missed anything. Then he closes the book and sets the pen down gently beside it. He leans back, letting his eyes wander to the window. Out there, the ocean still moves, patient and vast, as it always has. Next, he reaches for the small wooden box on the edge of the desk. Inside, a few folded letters, tied with twine. Some are from the Lighthouse service, official notes on supplies and weather reports. Others are more personal. One, written in neat cursive, bears the name of his sister in Boston. He unfolds it slowly, reading the familiar words. She writes of summer markets, a niece learning her letters, a neighbor who fell ill but recovered with much soup and stubbornness. He smiles faintly at that. Life on the mainland feels distant, like a story someone else is telling. Still, he is glad to hear from them, to be remembered. He takes out a blank sheet, presses it flat, and begins his reply. Dearest Margaret, the fog has been thick this week, but the sea remains calm. His words come slowly, not because he doesn't know what to say, but because he wishes to say it just right. He writes not only about the lighthouse, but of the birds nesting in the cliffs, the strange cloud he saw last Tuesday, and how the stars seem brighter on nights when the wind is still. When he finishes, he folds the paper carefully, tucks it into an envelope, and sets it near the door to send next time the supply boat comes. Then he sits quietly, watching the candle flame tremble as a breeze slips through the window frame. There is no one else here. No noise, no rush, only time. Time and the sea and the light that never sleeps. Afternoon comes slowly, the fog thinning at last, giving way to dull gray skies. The keeper stands outside, eyes lifted to the horizon. He feels something shifting in the wind, a weight, an edge. He's known the sea too long not to hear its whispers. There's a storm coming, not tonight, perhaps, but soon. He walks to the shed near the edge of the cliff, its door groaning on rusted hinges. Inside, ropes hang in coils, and barrels of oil line the walls. He takes inventory by habit, fingers brushing over labels, checking for cracks, for leaks, for anything that might fail when most needed. Outside, the gulls fly lower than usual, silent now, their wings sharp against the sky. He tightens the shutters around the glass room above, checks the roof line for wear, the chimney for loose stones. The lighthouse must be ready. Back inside, he lights the second lamp early. The shadows are already gathering, not from dusk, but from clouds thickening in the east. He stirs the fire, adds a new log, and listens to the first drops of rain tick against the glass. It is a slow rain at first, but steady, like a quiet drumbeat in the distance. He stands by the window, watching the waves grow bolder. What had been gentle ripples this morning are now curling crests, tipped in foam. White spray leaps against the rocks with rising force. He winds the mechanism again, making sure the lens keeps turning. The light must remain constant, even if everything else vanishes into mist and rain. The horn bellows its warning cry, deep and low, rolling through the thickening air. He remembers a storm years ago when the sea had swallowed 3 ships in a single night. Only one survivor made it to shore. The others were never seen again. He places a heavy coat near the stove to warm. He knows he may not sleep tonight. During storms, he often climbs the stairs twice an hour, checking flame, glass, gears, listening for anything out of place. Night comes early beneath storm clouds. The sky turns the color of iron, and lightning flashes far in the distance. The thunder comes slow behind it, rolling like a heavy cart down a long road. He sits for a moment in the kitchen, his tea untouched. Outside, the wind has begun to howl, not the playful gusts of summer, but the deep, moaning voice of something vast and angry. He checks the logbook once more, adds a line. Barometer dropping. Storm approaching from southeast. Lantern wound. Foghorn sounding hourly, and then he begins the long climb again, up the spiral stairs, toward the lantern room, toward the light that must never fail. By the time he reaches the top, the wind is screaming through the cracks around the lantern room. Rain lashes against the glass, sheets of water blown sideways, as if the sea itself has taken to the sky. He steadies himself on the narrow walkway, circling the great lens. His hands rest on the rail, damp with sea spray even inside the tower. Below, waves hammer the rocks, boiling white foam into the air, filling the world with salt and roar. The flame inside the lens still burns strong, flickering but not faltering, its golden eye turning, sending out that faithful pulse of light into the storm-racked dark. He checks the fuel, tightens the latch, and pulls his coat tighter around his shoulders. The lantern groans softly with the wind, but the glass holds firm. For a long while, he remains up there, watching, not because he must, the mechanism would turn on its own, but because this is the moment that defines him. Not the calm mornings, not the logs and letters, but this howling night, when every ship on the water looks to this light, this tower, this man. Lightning cracks open the sky, a jagged white vein that cuts from cloud to cliff. The thunder follows fast, shaking the tower under his boots. He flinches, but does not move away. Instead, he places one hand gently on the stone wall. It is cold, but solid, enduring. Hours pass. He loses track of time, his watch left ticking somewhere near the fire downstairs. He marks time only by the sound of the horn and the distant chime of the mechanism. At last, there's a shift, a pause, not silence, but something lighter in the wind. The waves still crash, but there is less fury, less weight in the air. He blinks, leaning forward to peer into the mist. Somewhere far off, a break in the cloud. The stars peek through, soft and distant, like pinpricks in velvet. He exhales slowly. The worst has passed. The storm, like a beast, has moved on. He descends the spiral stairs, each step slow, his legs trembling slightly, not from fear, but from standing guard too long. Back in the kitchen, the tea is cold, but he drinks it anyway. It tastes of metal and quiet, and of victory. He scribbles a note in the log. Storm past. Lantern maintained. No visible wreckage. Light held steady, and for a moment he allows himself to sit by the stove, eyes closed, head resting against the wooden wall, not asleep, but deeply still. Outside, the sea begins to calm. The waves fall into rhythm. The wind whispers, and the tower, faithful as ever, keeps its silent watch. Dawn arrives slowly, soft and gray, like a blanket draped across the world. The keeper wakes before the sun, not by alarm, but by habit, by instinct, born from years of early light. The fire in the stove has faded to embers, but the room still holds the storm's memory, the scent of salt, the hum of wind in the stone. He stretches his legs, rubbing at a sore knee, and rises without a word. Upstairs, the lantern still spins, though its light dims against the pale arrival of morning. He winds it down gently, fingers careful, like putting a child to rest. The flame dies with a soft flicker, leaving behind the smell of burned oil and warm brass. Outside, the sea has changed its tune. No longer wild, it murmurs and rolls in a softer rhythm. The sky breaks apart, revealing streaks of pink and gold above a sea that no longer bites. He steps onto the narrow catwalk around the lantern room, boots wet with dew. Far below, the jagged cliffs drip quietly, and the gulls return to their endless circling. Crying out as if nothing had happened, he scans the horizon with his spyglass. A ship in the distance, small, steady, moving northward with its sails half raised. Safe now, thanks to the light, thanks to him. He lowers the glass and closes his eyes for a moment, letting the morning sun warm his face. Downstairs, he prepares breakfast, eggs fried in a heavy pan, a heel of bread, black coffee strong enough to wake the bones. He eats slowly, staring out the small kitchen window. Toward the sea, there's a strange peace after storms, he's always thought. A hush, not silence, but something deeper, like the world holding its breath. Later, he ventures outside, walking the narrow path along the cliff to check the oil shed and supply room. The shutters held, the glass is unbroken. Even the chicken coop, half hidden behind a stone wall, still stands. The birds cluck softly as if unaware of the chaos just hours before. He gathers the logbook, opens a fresh page, and begins writing in his careful hand. Morning clear, winds light, sea moderate, storm damage minimal. His handwriting is small, but firm, a quiet record of all that passed. While the world slept, he sits on the step outside the door, mug in hand, watching the sea breathe. This, too, is part of the work, not just guarding ships or lighting lamps, but witnessing the weather, recording the rhythm of tides, being present when no one else is. The sea has calmed, but he knows it won't stay gentle for long. It never does. By midday, the sky is bright and blue, the storm scrubbed clean from the air. The waves sparkle now, reflecting the high August sun, and gulls wheel lazily above the tower. The keeper hears it first, a faint puttering sound. Far off on the water, he leans forward on the stone rail, squinting toward the bay. A boat, small, low in the water, its motor chugging steadily, a familiar silhouette slicing through the calm. He smiles, just a little. It's the supply boat from the mainland. Once a week, sometimes less, when the weather turns foul. A local man brings fuel, canned goods, spare parts, and, if he's lucky, mail. He climbs down the tower steps quickly, boots thumping against the spiral iron, coat over his arm. By the time he reaches the rocky landing below, the boat is nearly docked, ropes tossed across the posts, and the small man at the helm tipping his hat. "Storm treat you all right?" the boatman calls. The keeper nods. No worse than most. Lantern held. They unload the crates together, a rhythm they know well. Kerosene tins, bread wrapped in brown paper, a sack of onions, new wicks, a spool of wire. At the bottom of the last crate, wrapped in oilskin, he finds the letters. 2 envelopes, one crisp, white, the other brown and worn, edges soft from many hands. He thanks the man with a short wave, and the boat departs again. Cutting through the blue, inside the lighthouse kitchen, he sets the letters down beside the cold stove. He doesn't open them at once. Instead, he prepares tea, washes the sea salt from his face, and changes into a clean shirt. The first letter is from the Lighthouse Board, a formal report, instructions for an upcoming inspection, reminders to log oil use, a new regulation about chimney brushes. He folds it neatly, slides it into a drawer. The second letter he opens slowly, carefully. It's written in a fine looping hand, the ink faded slightly. The pages smell of lilacs, of home. His sister, writing from Boston, she tells of her garden, of her two boys learning to read, of a new bakery that opened near the docks. She asks how the sea is, if the gulls still nest on the north cliff, if he ever sees the whales pass by. She says she misses him, that he should come visit when the season ends. That mother still asks about the lighthouse, when she forgets what year it is. He reads the letter 3 times, then places it carefully inside a wooden box beside his bed, one of many. He never answers them. There is too much to say and too little time between oiling gears and feeding chickens and watching storms. But he keeps everyone. As the day draws to a close, the sky shifts once more, the bright blue of afternoon, softening into peach, then gold, then a deepening slate. The lighthouse tower casts a long shadow across the rocks below, reaching out to sea like a finger pointing home. The keeper finishes his tasks quietly. He checks the oil stars, sweeps the catwalk clean of gull feathers, and oils the turning gears of the great lens. His hands know every notch, every creak, every motion. They move with a practiced rhythm that doesn't need thought, only care. As twilight deepens, he climbs the stairs again, step by step, toward the lantern room. Up here, the wind is steady, but gentler now, as if the storm has taken its rage and gone elsewhere. He lights the lamp with a practiced flick of his match, watching as the flame flares to life, then settles. The great lens begins to turn, casting its first arc of light across the ocean. The beam sweeps slowly, reaching out into the night, touching invisible ships, warning the unseen. Down below, the windows glow with warm amber. The stove crackles. The kettle hisses gently. He pours himself a final cup of tea and stands by the window. This is the hour he loves most. Not morning, nor noon, but the quiet hush of evening. The world feels smaller now, the sea less fierce. The light from the lantern above moves in slow, sweeping arcs, cutting through the dark like a heartbeat. He pulls a chair beside the fire and opens a well-worn book, its pages soft with use. He reads slowly, letting each word settle, like dust in the corners. Outside, night deepens. The stars appear, one by one, until the sky is freckled with silver. Far off, he hears a bell buoy clanging softly, marking the rhythm of the tide. Somewhere, a ship's horn groans, low and long, a sound carried on mist and memory. He closes the book and leans back, listening not just to the sea, but to the silence in between, the hush that lives only in places far from cities, where one man's breath is the only sound between the waves. He closes his eyes. The day has passed. Another safe night begins, and the light, his light, shines on. The fire dies low, burning down to soft orange coals. The kettle has long since gone quiet. Outside, the wind has returned, a soft whisper curling through the rocks, tapping gently against the windows. Up in the tower, the great light continues its slow rotation, faithful and tireless, casting its sweeping beam far out across the darkened sea. Below, in his small quarters, the keeper dozes in his chair, a blanket draped over one shoulder. his face lined with salt and time. But in dreams, he is not old. He walks once more along the shore, barefoot in the cold surf, his sister chasing gulls beside him, laughter carried on the wind. His father stands by a fishing boat, calling them in, his hands dark with rope tar and the scent of herring. The old town is alive again, not just in memory, but in dream. Cobblestone streets, oil lamps glowing warmly, horses stamping at the hitch posts, children waving as they run. Past the baker's shop, he sees her too, the one he left behind, hair tied in ribbon, cheeks red from the cold, a book tucked beneath one arm. She's not angry anymore. She smiles. She reaches for his hand. In the dream, he never takes the post. In the dream, he stays. But even in dreams, the sea calls him back. A wave rushes up the sand, high and cold, and when it falls away, the town is gone. The figures gone. Only the sound of the wind remains, that constant wind, the voice of the ocean that never truly sleeps. He wakes, not with a start, but with a sigh. The chair creaks beneath him. As he rises, blanket falling away, he moves slowly, feet familiar with the worn boards. Outside, the sky is black and starless. Mist drifts like smoke across the cliff edge. He climbs the tower once more, hand sliding along the cold iron rail. Each step echoes in the silence, as though the lighthouse itself listens. At the top, he checks the flame, still strong. The gears still turn. The light still shines. He stands for a moment, bathed in the warm pulse of glass and fire, watching the ark sweep over the waves. Somewhere out there, a ship sails safely because of this light, because of him. He nods once, a quiet salute, then turns back down the stairs, boots soft against stone. His bed waits below, small, simple, a folded letter beside the pillow. He lays down slowly, pulls the blanket to his chest, and lets the sea sing him to sleep. Outside, the lantern turns, the wind whispers, the waves breathe, and the keeper dreams again. Morning returns, quiet and gray. Mist clings to the windows like breath on glass. The ocean hums below, steadier now, its fury spent, its rhythm calm. The keeper stirs from sleep, slowly rising, muscles stiff, eyes still half dreaming. He stands at the window, watching the world reappear, inch by inch. First the rocks, then the gulls, then the far curve of the horizon. Another day has begun. He washes in cold water, buttons his shirt, ties the laces of his boots. Each act is a ritual. Each gesture holds weight. He brews his tea, slices bread, writes a few lines in his journal. The entry is short. Storm past. Light held steady. Saw 2 ships. One sounded its horn. 3 short calls. Thank you. He smiles at that. Not every ship gives thanks, but some do. He climbs the tower again, greets the great lens as one might greet a friend. The mechanism ticks softly, a steady heartbeat of brass in motion. He checks the oil, cleans the glass, winds the crank. Below, waves lap gently at the base of the cliff. Above, the sky begins to clear, a pale blue blooming through thinning mist. He takes his tea, onto the gallery walk, standing outside the lantern room, the wind pulling at his coat. He sips slowly, gazing out to sea. There are no ships in sight, not yet. Only the endless ocean, wide and waiting. But he knows they're out there. He always does, even when he cannot see them. He thinks of those who came before, the men who built this tower, stone by stone, in rain and sun. He thinks of the keepers before him, men with strong backs, quiet hands, and a love for light. And he wonders who will come after. Someone will, surely. This place is too important to forget, too necessary to abandon. Someone will take his place, climb these same stairs, light the same flame. And perhaps, just perhaps, they'll read his journals, see the lines he wrote in quiet mornings like this one, and feel, for a moment, as if they know him, as if he's still here. He finishes his tea. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of salt and pine. A gull circles overhead, calling once. Then drifting inland, he smiles. The light turns above him, steady and true, marking time not in hours, but in heartbeats of fire. Down below, the tide begins to rise. That night, he didn't light a candle before sleep. He let the lantern above speak for him, its slow turning beam drawing soft arcs of light across the ceiling, as if painting a lullaby in motion. The room was warm from the fire, blanket heavy on his legs, the ticking of the old mantel clock just barely heard beneath the steady breathing of the sea. But the past has its own footsteps, and they do not wait for silence. In dreams, he walks the beach again, barefoot through wet sand, sun still low on the horizon, casting a golden path across the water. He is younger here, his hair darker, shoulders straighter. Beside him, a girl runs with laughter in her throat, barefoot too, her dress pulled up in handfuls to keep the waves from catching her hem. Anna. He hasn't thought of her in months, maybe years. Not on purpose. Some memories stay hidden until the right wind blows them back. In the dream, she turns toward him, face glowing in the early sun. "You'll leave," she says, not sadly, just stating it as fact. "I have to," he replies, just as he had on that day long ago. It's not just a job, it's needed. The sea's not safe. Her smile fades slightly, but her eyes never stop searching his. "You'll be needed here too." He reaches for her hand, but already the tide is rising, and when he looks again, she is farther away, each wave between them deeper than the last. He wakes with a start, not in panic, but with that heavy ache. Dreams sometimes leave behind, the kind that presses on the ribs and lingers in the throat. Outside, dawn is only just beginning again. The sky is the color of pearl, light barely touching the waves. He dresses slowly, boots creaking, fingers stiff. In the mirror above the wash basin, his face is pale and lined, but steady. He pours cold water over his hands, watches it trail down the basin, watches it vanish. Later, he opens the wooden box beneath his bed. Not the one with the letters, a smaller one. Inside, wrapped in cloth, a single photograph. Faded now, edges curled, but still clear enough to see the girl in the sun, smiling barefoot beside the sea. He doesn't cry. He never does. he simply sits by the window, holding the photo to the morning light as the first call of the gulls echoes up from the cliffs below. Later that week, as the fog returned, he heard something unusual, a knock. It was light at first. 3 short taps, then silence. Then again, fainter, as if the wind had shaped it. He opened the heavy wooden door, half expecting a trick of the storm. But there, drenched in sea spray, stood a boy, no older than 16, barefoot, with salt in his hair and a folded note in his fist. The keeper blinked. He hadn't seen anyone this close to the tower in weeks. Lost? He asked. The boy shook his head, held out the note. From Mr. Callahan, he said, the dockmaster. The keeper took the paper, his fingers brushing the boy's. Cold, shivering, he read the message quickly. Callahan was asking if the boy could stay a few nights. A favor, no room at the docks, family gone. Too young to work the boats yet. He looked at the boy again. Thin frame, tired eyes, a hunger that wasn't just for food. He nodded once, gestured him inside. No nonsense, the keeper said simply. Work earns warmth. You help, I feed you. The boy smiled, a small, worn smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He stepped inside. For the first time in many years, the lighthouse was no longer quiet. There were extra footsteps on the stairs, a second mug at the table, soft coughing in the bunk room at night. The boy's name was Eli. He had worked odd jobs on fishing docks since he was 10. He didn't talk much, but he listened like the sea. The keeper taught him things, how to trim the wick, how to clean the lens without leaving streaks, how to wind the crank so the light would never falter. Eli watched every motion carefully, then mirrored it without needing to ask twice. They shared meals in silence, mostly bread and soup, sometimes boiled eggs, once a rare jar of preserved peaches. The keeper had hidden for years. Eli smiled that night, a real one, and in that smile, something inside the keeper shifted. He had never married, never had children, but here was someone learning, someone who might carry the flame long after his own hands were too tired to strike the match. One night, when the sea was calm and the fire burned slow, the keeper found himself telling Eli a story about a schooner that had nearly missed the cliffs during a snowstorm years ago, about how the light cut through that blinding night just in time to turn the helm. Eli listened quietly. When the story ended, he simply said, "That's why you stay." The keeper nodded. Neither spoke again that evening, but they both understood. The days passed quietly, marked by the turning of gears and the soft rhythm of waves against the stone. Eli rose early now, often before the keeper, sweeping the floors, feeding the chickens, checking the oil stores without needing to be told. He was quick to learn, but slow to speak. His words few, his thoughts held close. The keeper didn't mind. He wasn't a man for chatter. He'd lived too long with silence to fear it. One morning, fog rolled in, thick and white, hiding even the cliffs below. It was the kind of fog that swallowed sound, where the horn needed to cry out every few minutes just to remind the sea where land began. The keeper stood with Eli in the lantern room, the two of them wrapped in their coats, watching the great lens spin. "This," the keeper said, his voice low and steady, "is when it matters most." Eli nodded. "Even if no one sees it?" "Especially then." They stood a while longer, not speaking, only listening to the slow turn of the mechanism, to the deep groan of the foghorn, to the heartbeat of duty echoing in glass and iron. Later that afternoon, they cleaned the lamp housing together. Eli held the tools, passed them without being asked. The keeper watched him, how careful his hands were, how gently he touched the brass. "You could do this alone someday," he said quietly, not meaning to say it aloud. Eli glanced at him. "Would you let me?" The keeper didn't answer right away. He tightened a bolt, wiped his hands on a cloth, then looked at the boy. "Maybe, if you respect the sea, if you remember this isn't just a job. It's a promise." Eli's eyes didn't leave his. "I won't forget." That night, the keeper added a new page to his journal, not in the logbook, a separate one, smaller, bound in leather. He wrote, "Eli has begun to understand the light, not just how it works, but why it must never fail." Then he closed the book, set it on the small shelf beside his bunk, and leaned back in his chair, watching the flame flicker behind the glass window. He had thought once that he would die here, alone, unseen, a name in some distant registry. But now a shadow moved up the stairs, soft-footed, watchful, and the tower no longer felt quite so empty. One evening, the air changed. The seagulls flew lower, their cries sharper, and the wind brought a scent, not of salt, but of something old, something restless. The keeper stood outside the tower, his coat pulled tight, watching the sky. Dark clouds were gathering, thick and heavy, stretched across the horizon like a bruise. "Storm's coming," he said softly. Eli came beside him, hands in his pockets. "How bad?" The keeper didn't answer right away. He watched the sea, how it swelled and shifted, like it was breathing too fast. Bad enough? They worked quickly, securing the boats, tying down barrels, checking every latch, every hinge. Inside, the glass of the lantern was polished once more, the oil double-checked, the foghorn made ready. By sundown, the wind had risen to a howl. Rain followed, sheets of it slapping against stone like hands on a drum. The keeper lit the lamp just before darkness fell. It bloomed to life, steady and golden, spinning through the storm like a heartbeat in the chest of night. Inside, the tower groaned, old stone, old wood, worn iron, creaking under the weight of the gale. But it held. It always held. Eli sat near the stove, blanket around his shoulders, eyes wide. The keeper sat across from him, calm as the eye of the storm. "Have you ever seen one worse?" Eli asked. The keeper thought. Once, in '76, waves climbed the cliff, took a boat clean off the rocks. "Were you alone?" He shook his head. "My brother was here then. We rode it out together." Eli looked at the flames. "Do you miss him?" The keeper's eyes softened, but he didn't look away. Every day, the storm lasted hours, long, howling, angry hours. The foghorn bellowed, the light spun, and through it all, the keeper stayed awake. He checked the windows, checked the lamp, checked the sea. Eli, though frightened, did not ask to leave his post. In the early hours of morning, The wind began to tire. The rain thinned. The waves sank lower, still dangerous, but less wild. By dawn, only mist remained. The keeper opened the heavy door. Water pooled across the steps. Seaweed clung to the railing. But the tower stood. The lamp still turned. Eli stepped outside, face to the wind, hair damp, eyes bright. "That was incredible," he whispered. The keeper smiled. That was survival. And for the first time, Eli smiled back. A small thing, but real, like sunlight on a broken wave. Morning broke slowly, as if the world itself were tired from the night before. The sky was pale and bruised, clouds hanging low like wet laundry. Seabirds returned, circling the tower cautiously, testing the air with their wings. Down by the rocks, debris littered the shore. Broken branches, bits of rope, a shattered oar, a red buoy washed far from home. The keeper and Eli stepped outside, boots sinking into wet earth. Salt clung to everything. The air was thick with the sharp scent of brine and kelp. They walked the grounds in silence, checking for damage. The tower had held. The shed had not. Its door hung crooked, roof slumped in the middle like a tired spine. "Well," the keeper muttered, "we'll fix it." Eli nodded, already pulling tools from a crate. They spent the morning hammering, lifting, straightening. 2 sets of hands, one old, one young, working in rhythm, sharing weight. By noon, the sun broke through. A few pale rays spilled across the sea, turning the waves silver. They paused to eat. By the edge of the cliff, biscuits and dried apples. Eli's fingers were scraped, his nails dirty, but he didn't complain. The keeper looked at him quietly. "You worked hard today," Eli shrugged. "You said we'd fix it." The keeper nodded, but inside, something softened. Later that day, a ship appeared on the horizon. Small, slow, a cargo vessel crawling north. The keeper raised the spyglass. Out of Portland, he guessed, headed for Bar Harbor. He turned to Eli. "Want to signal it?" Eli blinked, surprised. "Me? You've learned enough." The boy stood, nervous but excited. He walked to the signal station, a small platform with flags and rope. The keeper stood behind him, quiet, steady. Together, they raised the flags, one after the other, a code of color, dancing in the wind. From the ship, a reply came, slow but sure. Eli laughed aloud. "They saw us." They did. A moment passed, and then another. "I've never spoken to a ship before," Eli said. "You just did." The keeper smiled. By dusk, the sea had calmed. Soft waves touched the cliff base. The gulls had returned to their nests inside the tower. The keeper lit the lamp once more. The lens turned, steady as breath. And somewhere out there, someone saw that light. A sailor on the water, a captain at the wheel, and they knew they were not alone. Eli stood by the window, watching the horizon until the stars began to bloom. The night was calm, and it belonged to them. The next morning began with fog, thick as wool, rolling over the cliff edge like slow-moving smoke. The world beyond the tower disappeared. No sea, no sky, just white. Inside, the keeper brewed coffee. Eli sat cross-legged on the floor, leafing through an old logbook, its pages yellowed and frayed, lined with names, dates, notes in tidy script. This one says, "Ice floes drifting south, warned passing schooner." Eli's read aloud. The keeper smiled softly. That was February of '86. Coldest winter I remember. The waves froze at the edge of the dock. Eli traced the lines on the page with a fingertip. "Do you ever write anything besides ship records?" The keeper shrugged. "Sometimes I write letters." "Letters? To who?" He hesitated, looking out the misted window. "To no one, really? Just to remember." He rose, walked to a cabinet, pulled out a small wooden box. Inside were dozens of folded papers, each one carefully tied with a bit of twine. He handed one to Eli. "You can read it, if you'd like." The boy untied it gently. The handwriting was steady, slanted, and carried the scent of salt and oil. March 3rd, 1887. The sea was restless today, and the gulls flew low. I dreamed of warm bread and music I cannot remember. Sometimes the silence here is heavy, but the light keeps spinning, and I keep watch. Eli looked up. "It's kind of like a poem." The keeper gave a quiet nod. "Sometimes it feels that way." For a while, they sat, in the hush of fog and flame, the lamp flickering behind them. Eli asked, "Can I write one?" The keeper gestured to the desk. "Go ahead." Eli took a sheet of paper, dipped the pen in ink, and began. His handwriting was uneven, letters wide and uncertain, but his words were his own. "Today, I learned how to signal a ship, and it answered. The light turns like a heartbeat, and I think I could live here forever." He paused, then added one more line. "It's quiet, but not lonely." When he was done, he folded it up, tied it with twine, and placed it beside the others. The keeper said nothing. He only nodded, and the moment passed between them like the soft call of a distant bell. Outside, the fog began to lift, not all at once, but slowly, as if the sea were waking up. A dark shape emerged, a small boat rowing in toward shore. It was the supply man. He came once a month, bringing mail, canned food, oil for the lamp, and news from town. Eli rushed down the path to help haul the crates. The keeper followed, his coat trailing behind him. The man handed over a small bundle of letters wrapped in string. He tipped his hat. "Town's quiet. Saw a whale offshore last week. Big one." Eli's eyes widened. "A whale?" The man grinned. "Biggest I ever saw. Tossed a wave so high it soaked the pier." The keeper chuckled. "Well, send it our regards." The man laughed, climbed back into his boat, and disappeared once more into the sea. Back in the tower, Eli sorted the mail. A letter addressed to the keeper sat unopened. He turned it in his hands. "You going to read it?" The keeper stared at the envelope, then slipped it into his coat. "Later," he said, but his hands lingered a moment too long. Outside, the sea moved gently. The fog had cleared, and the sky, for now, was blue. That evening, as the sky turned lilac and gold, the keeper stood on the narrow walkway outside the lantern room. The wind had calmed. Only the rhythmic whisper of waves and the cry of a single gull echoed below. Eli appeared behind him, wrapped in a shawl, clutching a tin cup of tea. He offered it, and the keeper took it with a nod. Together they watched as the sun dipped behind the sea, casting long shadows across the stones. "You ever miss music?" Eli asked softly. The keeper turned. Music? Yeah, like fiddles or church bells. Songs. The keeper smiled faintly. There used to be a piano in the town tavern. A man named Patrick played it on Fridays. His fingers were quicker than his tongue and twice as sharp. Eli grinned. Did you dance? I did once, only once. Nearly tripped over my boots. They both laughed. Then a quiet hush settled again. The light above them turned, casting slow beams that swept across the sea. Inside the tower, Eli found an old box tucked beneath the stairs. It was heavy with dust and covered in faded stamps from far-off places. He pulled it out, opened it slowly, and gasped. Inside were small trinkets, a brass compass, a cracked magnifying glass, a spool of silver thread, and at the very bottom, a wooden music box. He brought it up to the keeper. What's this? The man's eyes widened slightly. I haven't seen that in years. He lifted it gently, brushed off the dust, and turned the key. At first, only a faint grinding. Then a soft tune emerged, thin and sweet, like rain tapping on glass. Eli sat on the steps, eyes wide. It's beautiful. The keeper listened, quiet as stone. Then he spoke, almost in a whisper. My sister gave it to me before I came here. She said, so you won't forget what home sounds like. Eli looked up. Do you still remember? The keeper didn't answer. He only let the music play. The notes filled the tower, curling around the walls, dancing with the dust, sinking into the wood. It was a melody no one had heard in a long, long time. Later that night, Eli placed the music box on the windowsill beside his bed. It glimmered in the moonlight, a tiny echo of the world beyond the waves. The keeper sat by the fire, pen in hand. He opened a fresh page in his journal and wrote, August 17th, 1890. Tonight, the sea is calm. We played music, and for a moment, I remembered everything I'd forgotten. He set down the pen and stared at the flames, flickering in silence. Outside, the ocean slept, and above it all, the light turned on, slow, steady, forever watching. Morning arrived with a hush. The sun peeked through low-hanging clouds, casting a golden haze across the sea and painting silver lines on every ripple of water below. Eli rose early. He had slept lightly, waking once when the old music box stopped playing, and again when the gulls began their usual song. He found the keeper already awake, polishing the brass lens in the lantern room. A gentle scraping echoed through the tower, alongside the scent of salt and oil. Morning, Eli said, his voice still thick with sleep. Morning, replied the keeper, not looking up. A pause, then, storm's coming. Eli turned toward the sea. Far off, the horizon had darkened. A heavy gray wall of cloud crawled closer, slow but certain, the kind of storm that arrived without apology. How bad will it be? The keeper wiped the lens with a final swipe. Hard to say, but we'd better prepare for the worst. They moved quickly. Shutters were closed on the lower windows. Lanterns trimmed and tested. Ropes coiled and tied tight against the wall. The tower transformed from home to fortress. Later that afternoon, as the first drops of rain spattered the glass, Eli carried crates of coal into the cellar. He moved fast, his boots echoing against stone, while wind began to whistle through the cracks. Upstairs, the keeper set out dry matches, extra oil, and a rusted metal lantern with a cracked glass top. Eli returned, damp from the shoulders up. "Why that one?" he asked, eyeing the old lantern. The keeper shrugged. "She's never failed me." The storm arrived with sudden rage. Wind screamed against the stone walls. Rain lashed sideways, sheets of water crashing like waves against the windows. The light above turned steadily, fighting back against the night. In the kitchen, they sat by the fire. The keeper sipped thick coffee. Eli pressed his ear to the wall, listening to the wind's wail. "It sounds angry." The keeper nodded. "The sea doesn't hate you, but it doesn't love you either. It just is." Lightning flashed. The tower shook, just slightly, enough to rattle the spoon in the keeper's mug. Then, all at once, the light above flickered. Then again, then darkness. The keeper stood instantly. "Come on." They climbed the spiral stairs, each step lit only by the glow of the old storm lantern shaking slightly in the keeper's hand. Inside the lantern room, the wind had blown open a vent. Rain streaked the glass. The lens had gone dark. The keeper moved fast, checking wires, feeling for heat, tightening knobs and whispering curses. Eli stood near the ladder, holding the lantern high. The storm outside roared louder. Then, with a hum, the light returned. Soft at first, then brighter, then steady. The keeper leaned back, soaked and smiling. "There she goes," he said. The storm lantern still burned in his hand, casting warm light against the cold glass. They stood together, watching the beam stretch out into the storm. A silent guardian in a wild world. "I get it now," Eli whispered. "This place, it's not just stone and glass, is it?" The keeper didn't answer. He didn't need to. The lighthouse spoke for them both, turning slowly again and again, through rain and wind and time. By dawn, the storm had passed. The wind had quieted. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the sea, still restless but no longer furious, breathed heavy and low. Eli awoke stiff and sore. He had fallen asleep in the chair beside the stove, a blanket draped clumsily across his shoulders. The keeper was nowhere in sight. Outside the narrow window, clouds parted, revealing faint beams of sunlight that skipped across puddles and wet stone. Eli stood slowly. His muscles protested. His hand smelled of smoke, salt, and oil. He climbed the stairs to find the keeper on the gallery, leaning on the railing, eyes lost somewhere far beyond the horizon. The air was clean and sharp. The sea, a vast mirror of gray and silver. "Didn't think we'd sleep at all," Eli said softly. The keeper didn't turn. "We didn't sleep, not really. Just rested with our eyes closed." Eli stepped out beside him. The view was overwhelming. Miles of sky and sea, empty and full at once. Below, the beach was strewn with kelp, driftwood, and pieces of storm-blown wreckage. A broken barrel, a snapped fishing float, a single red boot. "Storms wash things up," the keeper said. "Things that were lost, things that were meant to stay buried." Eli didn't answer. He was staring at the boot, a child's boot, small and bright, against the dark sand. The silence between them grew, but it wasn't empty. It was full of thoughts, full of memory, full of all the things they didn't say aloud. By midday, they descended to the shore. They moved through the scattered debris, collecting what could be burned or salvaged and leaving what belonged to the sea. Eli paused near a rock where a tiny bird sat, soaked, shivering, but alive. He cupped it gently in his hands. "I think she's lost," he murmured. "She's not," the keeper replied. "She just needs time." They built a small shelter near the stove. Dry cloth, crumbs of biscuit, a watchful eye. Eli stayed close, watching the bird breathe. The keeper busied himself, checking the wires, refueling the lamp, writing notes in his logbook. Hours passed. The rhythm of the lighthouse returned. By evening, the clouds cleared fully. Stars emerged, dozens at first, then hundreds, until the sky bloomed with silver dust. The beam turned again, steady, sure. From the gallery, they watched ships far off. Tiny specks, tiny lights, each relying on the one they kept burning. "You think she'll fly again?" Eli asked. The keeper nodded slowly. "She will. She just needs to remember how." Eli looked down at the bird, still sleeping, soft and still. Then he looked up, toward the sea, toward the stars, toward the endless turning light. He smiled. "I think I'm starting to understand," he said. The keeper glanced sideways. "You're not meant to understand, just to feel it." And he was right. Some places aren't explained. Some lives aren't solved. Some days are just lived, fully, quietly, completely. And the lighthouse, it kept turning. The next morning came quietly. No wind, no rain, only the gentle hush of waves lapping against the rocks below. Eli rose early, before the keeper. He moved silently through the kitchen, set the kettle on the stove, folded the wool blanket he had used. Something about the stillness felt sacred, like the lighthouse itself was holding its breath. On the table sat a small wooden box he hadn't noticed before. Worn edges, a broken hinge, and inside, a bundle of letters wrapped in faded blue ribbon. He didn't mean to pry, but his fingers moved anyway, softly lifting the topmost envelope. It was addressed in delicate handwriting. "To my Thomas." No stamp, no return name. He opened it slowly, eyes scanning each word, as if each one carried the weight of the sea. "My dearest, I still see you in every wave, still hear your voice in the fog. The lamp you lit still burns, and so do I." He read only a few lines before gently folding it again. Just then, the keeper stepped in. His eyes landed on the box. "You opened it," he said, not angry, not surprised, just a quiet statement. Eli set the letter down carefully. "I didn't mean to." "It's all right," the keeper said, pulling out a chair. "They're meant to be read now and then." He poured himself a cup of tea. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, just full. "Who was she?" Eli asked. The keeper stared out the window. "She was someone who once knew this place before I came, before even the sea changed." Eli waited. The keeper took a long breath. "There used to be a different keeper here, Thomas. He stayed through winters colder than this, storms fiercer than anything we've seen. He wrote letters too, but never sent them. She found them after he was gone and started writing back, even though he couldn't answer. Eli looked down at the ribbon-wrapped bundle. Letters written into silence, sent to a place no postman would visit. They say the sea takes what it loves, the keeper whispered. But sometimes it gives something back. The kettle began to whistle. Eli rose to pour the water. When he returned, he found the keeper holding a photograph. Sepia-toned, a man in uniform, standing proud beside a woman with dark eyes. She visited once, the keeper said, left this box and walked away. Said it belonged here, not with her. They sat together for a long time, drinking tea, watching the morning light shift through salt-blurred windows. The lighthouse felt alive again, as if the stories it held had been waiting for someone to listen. And Eli, he listened. He didn't ask more questions. He didn't need to. He simply folded the letter, returned it to its place, and tied the ribbon gently back into a knot. Some things didn't need answers, only remembrance. That night, the wind returned, not softly, like the sighs of the sea, but fierce and unrelenting. It howled through the cracks in the tower, rattling shutters, pulling at the glass like cold, invisible hands. Eli and the keeper worked quickly. They secured the lantern room, tightened the locks, checked the wick, filled the fuel. Outside, the ocean was a monster, black, roaring, its waves crashing against the rock with such force the tower shook beneath them. Snow began to fall sideways, swept by gusts so sharp they sliced across the window panes like blades. Eli stared into the storm, heart pounding. The keeper lit the great lamp, its beam piercing the night, casting long shadows through the swirling white. "This is what we wait for," he said, voice steady. "This is why we stay." The light revolved slowly, cutting through fog, warning ships that danger waited below. Eli followed the old man down the spiral steps. They checked the oil again, examined the doors, rechecked every latch and bolt. There was no room for error. Not here, not now. Hours passed. The storm grew louder, then quieter, then louder again, like the breathing of some terrible beast. They took turns sleeping, if sleep was possible at all, in a tower that creaked like bones, groaned like a ship at sea. At dawn, the worst of it had passed. The wind fell away. Waves pulled back, leaving behind seaweed, foam, and shattered driftwood. Eli stepped outside. His boots sank deep into snow. The world was white and silent, as if the storm had never come, as if the ocean had merely whispered a dream. He looked out to sea. No ships, no sails, just gulls returning to their circling paths. The keeper joined him on the steps. "Survived another," he said, as if marking time by tempests. Eli nodded, but said nothing. He felt something inside shift. Not fear, not relief. Something older, something heavier, like he now belonged to this place. Not just visiting, not passing through, but part of it, written into its stone and wind, its salt and silence. Later, over warm stew, the keeper told a story of a captain who once saw the lighthouse flame and turned his ship just in time. They never know we're here, he said. They don't see the faces, don't know the cold. They just see the light and sail on. Eli stirred his spoon slowly. And we stay, he whispered. The keeper looked at him, smiled, until someone else comes, and Eli wondered if that someone was already here, sitting at the table, writing himself quietly into the legacy of those who came before. 2 days after the storm, as the waves calmed and the skies cleared, Elias walked along the shoreline, boots crunching over salt-stiffened grass and shattered shells. He carried a basket in one hand, collecting driftwood for the stove, bits of rope, sea-polished glass, whatever the sea had tossed ashore in its fury. That morning was different. The air smelled cleaner, the sun brighter. Gulls cried overhead, less like mourners now, more like companions. Then he saw it, half buried in wet sand, tangled in kelp, was a green glass bottle, its surface scratched by stone and sea. Inside, a curled piece of paper. He picked it up, uncorked the top, poured out a scrap of handwritten words, faded, but still legible to whoever finds this. Know that I am lost, but not afraid. The sea is wide and time is long. Tell someone I was here. There was no name, no date, just that quiet plea echoing across time. Eli held the paper in his hand for a long while, looking out at the endless water. The keeper read it in silence when Eli returned, then set it gently beside the oil ledger, as if it belonged among the tower's other duties. People have always whispered into the sea, he said. They send out parts of themselves, hoping someone hears. That night, Eli couldn't stop thinking about it, the way someone had trusted the ocean. As a messenger, as a memory keeper, he lay in bed, listening to the quiet creak of the tower, the soft ticking of the old brass clock. What did it mean to leave behind a message and not know who might read it or when? The next morning, Eli asked the keeper if they could write one too. The old man raised a brow. You want to send your voice into the tide? Eli nodded. Together, they sat at the desk and wrote carefully in neat script. We live in the Lighthouse on the Maine coast. It is 1890. We watch the sea, and it watches us. If you find this, tell someone we were here. They signed it with both their names, folded it gently, sealed it in a jar instead of a bottle with wax and care. Then, at high tide, they walked down the rocks and let the ocean take it. Eli watched the jar bob once, twice, then vanish. Think it'll ever be found? He asked. The keeper didn't answer right away, then said, maybe not by eyes, but maybe by the sea, and somehow that was enough. The next morning, they returned to their routines, cleaning the glass, trimming the wick, recording wind speed in the logbook. But something had changed, not in the sea, not in the tower, but in Eli. He felt, for the first time, like part of a story, too big to understand, yet gentle enough to hold. By early October, the winds began to shift again, cooler now, cutting through the wool of Eli's coat, sharp as sea spray. Mornings came wrapped in mist, not the light summer kind, but a thick, wet blanket that clung to everything and swallowed sound. The lighthouse bell was needed more than ever. Its slow toll rang out, steady as a heartbeat, meant to warn ships away. but also, perhaps, to remind the keepers they were still here. Inside the tower, the windows sweated with condensation, and Eli found himself lighting lamps even at noon. Light became precious, and time moved differently, measured not in sunlight, but in how long the foghorn moaned before falling quiet again. Eli grew quiet, too. The keeper noticed. He said nothing for days, but then one night, as they shared warm beans and bread, he spoke gently. Fog makes thoughts drift inward, he said. Like the sea returning to itself, Eli looked up, eyes reflecting the golden lamplight. I keep thinking, he whispered, about the world out there, beyond this coast, beyond this fog. The keeper nodded, not surprised. It's natural, he said, but out there they think we're the lonely ones, when truly they are surrounded but never still. The words stuck with Eli, echoed between the stones like the wind that moved the bell. That night, the fog was so thick, Eli couldn't see even the base of the tower from the bedroom window above. It was like floating in a cloud, cut off from everything, yet wrapped in something ancient. He thought of the message in the bottle, of voices carried through storm, of lights that pierced the dark, and hands that trimmed the wicks. There was a strange peace to it, a surrender to the slowness, to the rhythm, to the hush. The next morning, when the bell tolled again, Eli rose without being called. He boiled water, swept the stone steps, checked the oil levels, and climbed the spiral stairs without a word. At the top, he lit the flame, watched it swell against the gray, and smiled. The keeper joined him, hands behind his back, chin tucked into his collar. Together, they stood watching, not the sea, but the fog itself, as if it might part and reveal something hidden, a ship perhaps, or a memory, or a world they'd forgotten. But even if it didn't, they were ready. They were here. They were the light. And for now, that was enough. As the days shortened and nights lengthened like deep breaths, Eli noticed how silence became a teacher. Not just the quiet between storms, but the silence within himself, the kind that filled up when the noise of the world faded away. The light in the lantern room was more than a beacon. It became a ritual. Each evening, just as the sky slipped from slate to ink, he climbed the spiral stair, each step a meditation. He'd open the iron hatch, step into the glass room, and kneel beside the great lamp. The keeper taught him to clean the lens with soft cloth and vinegar, to trim the wick with care as if he were preparing a sacred flame, because, in a way, this was no ordinary light. This light could save lives. One night, as snow threatened the horizon, the wind howled louder than usual. The flame flickered. Eli froze, afraid, but the keeper, steady and calm, placed a hand on his shoulder. "She's stronger than she looks," he said. "Just like you." The words warmed more than the flame. Later, Eli sat at his desk, writing in the logbook, his pen moving slowly but with confidence. He wrote of light, of wind, of dreams, and he added a note just for himself. There is power in doing the same thing every day, especially when that thing keeps others safe. A storm came the next evening, harder than most. Waves beat the cliffs, and sea foam leapt over the rocks like angry ghosts. The lighthouse groaned, yet stood firm. Inside, the lantern burned steady, and below, two figures sat by the stove, one old, one young, drinking tea, listening to the sea rage. Like a lion at the door, they said nothing, no need. Their presence, the warmth of the room, the glow of the lamp above, was enough. Later, as Eli tucked himself into bed, he thought of all the ships sailing blind through the dark, and how, because of their small tower, those sailors would see light. They would turn their wheels, adjust their sails, and sail on safe, because someone was watching the shore, because someone lit the lamp. By early January, a thick blanket of snow rested over the cliffs like a sleeping bear, silent and heavy. The lighthouse stood alone, wrapped in white, its red roof peeking out like a cardinal in winter woods. Eli had grown used to solitude, even found comfort in it. But he couldn't help the flicker of surprise when the sound of bells echoed up the path. A horse pulling a small sleigh, a figure hunched under a thick coat. Eli rushed to the window. The keeper followed, a slow smile spreading across his face. "It's the supply man," he said, "late but not lost." They opened the heavy door, the cold rushing in like an excited dog as the sleigh pulled up. The driver, a bearded man named Silas, tipped his hat. "Brought your flour, kerosene, and mail," he said. "And a pie from Miss Turner down the road. Claims you still owe her a story." The keeper chuckled. "She'll get her story come spring." Eli helped unload the goods, his hands numb, but his heart strangely full. It felt good to see another face, to hear another voice, even if only for a few minutes. As Silas warmed himself with tea, he shared news from town. The river had frozen early, school had closed, and a neighbor's dog had chased a bear clean out of a barn. Eli listened wide-eyed, realizing how small and wide the world could be. At the same time, when the sleigh finally pulled away and the jingle of bells faded, the quiet felt different, not empty, just peaceful. They stored the supplies in silence, the keeper humming under his breath. Then they lit the lamp together, its steady flame flickering against the frost-covered glass. That night, Eli sat by the window, pie in one hand, letter from home in the other. His mother had written. Her words smelled faintly of lavender. She told him how the snow made the porch creak, how his little sister missed his stories, how proud they were of him. He read it twice, then folded it gently and placed it beside his journal outside. The wind whispered against the tower, but inside the stove hummed, the lantern glowed, and Eli smiled. He may have been far from home, but in that moment he didn't feel far at all, because warmth sometimes is just a letter and a slice of pie, and because the sea, for all its wildness, felt quieter when someone remembered you. February arrived with breath sharp as broken glass, and skies hung low like heavy wool over the Atlantic. For days the sea boiled, gray and mean, pounding the rocks like drums of war. Inside the tower, Eli and the keeper listened as wind curled round every stone, and the lantern windows wept salt and ice. They spoke less during storms like this, not from fear, but reverence. Nature demanded silence. On the third night, the keeper stood by the narrow stair, holding the journal open. "Storms almost like the one in '82, he said. "I lost a fishing boat and half the dock then." He traced his finger along a curling page, noting wave height, barometric pressure, the time the wind first turned savage. Eli listened, fascinated. The journal held storms from decades past, each line a memory of thunder and foam, each page a warning. He imagined himself writing such things one day, filling pages with salt and sky, a quiet witness to wind and water. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed through the tower. Both turned. Another strike against the outer door. Snow had frozen the hinges, and now the wind tried them. Again and again, like fingers testing locks in the night. The keeper secured the entry with iron latches, then checked every bolt, every shutter. By the time he returned upstairs, Eli had lit another lamp. "She's breathing hard tonight," the boy whispered. "Aye," said the keeper. "She's restless." They climbed together to the lantern room. The glass panes shuddered, but the flame stood strong, its golden eye turning slowly, cutting through storm and dark like a steady breath. Far below, Eli saw white foam burst against the cliffs, waves crashing so high they vanished into the dark above. He'd never seen the sea this angry, and yet he wasn't afraid. He stood beside the keeper, feeling the tower beneath his boots, solid, anchored, patient. "This lighthouse," the keeper said softly. "She's seen worse." The storm went on through the night, but the flame never flickered, and by morning, when the sea had calmed and the first pale light touched the snow, a ship's horn called out from far beyond the fog. Eli and the keeper stood in silence, watching the ghostly shape emerge, safely guided by a light, and two quiet watchers on a lonely cliff. The sea grew quiet in the days that followed. Where once the waves had crashed and cried, now they whispered, soft as lullabies. Gulls returned, circling slowly, and seals lounged again on black, wet rocks, basking in the thawing sun. Inside the lighthouse, Ellie rose early, without needing the bell. The keeper found him already by the window, hands tucked behind his back, eyes scanning the sea like he belonged to it. "You're learning," the old man said, half teasing, half proud. Eli smiled, but didn't speak. Something was stirring inside him, a feeling he didn't yet have words for, something between longing and belonging. Later that afternoon, while sorting dried nets in the shed, he found an envelope tucked behind a beam, bold yellowed, sealed in wax. He brought it to the keeper. The old man looked at the mark on the seal, then sat slowly, his eyes softening. "I'd forgotten about this." He broke the seal with care and unfolded the brittle paper. The words faded, but still there. It was a letter written by a keeper from 1837, a man stationed here long before Eli or even the current keeper had arrived. The letter wasn't addressed to anyone in particular. It spoke of the same lantern, the same stones, the same winds. It spoke of solitude, of watching ships vanish into fog, and of the quiet pride that comes from helping others without ever meeting them. Eli listened as the keeper read aloud. "I light the way," the letter said, "though none may know my name. That is the way of the sea." When he finished, the room was quiet. No gulls cried, no waves lapped, just the sound of a clock ticking slowly and the crackle of a low fire. "That man," the keeper said, "he never left this place. His name's on the brass plate by the door." Eli had seen it, but never thought about who it belonged to. Now it felt different, like he'd met a ghost who shared his heartbeat. That evening, as dusk stretched its arms across the sea, the boy climbed to the lantern alone. The keeper watched him from below, not with concern, but with quiet trust. Eli lit the flame, as he had been taught. He opened the journal and carefully wrote the day's notes, adding a line at the end. "The sea is calmer today, but the light still burns. I think I understand why." He closed the book gently and watched the great lens turn. Miles away, a distant ship would see that flash and change its course, trusting in a tower, a flame, and the invisible hands that kept them steady. Eli stood by the window, the wind combing his hair, and for the first time he felt not like a visitor, but like a part of the story. The lighthouse had claimed him, not with force, but with quiet, with duty, and with light. Spring arrived softly. It didn't announce itself, but crept in through the cracks, like warmth finding cold fingers. Grass began to green at the base of the cliffs. Buds curled from branches like secret thoughts, and the sea turned from iron to glass, reflecting skies that no longer threatened. The lighthouse stood as always, unchanged on the outside. But something inside had shifted. The keeper moved more slowly now, his steps deliberate, his gaze far away. One morning, as the gulls shrieked with joy and salt sprayed against the glass, he handed Eli a small tin box. Inside, a key, a folded letter, and a compass. "You'll need these," he said, his voice quieter than the waves. Eli looked at him, confused. "Are you leaving?" he asked. The old man shook his head. "No," he said, "but one day soon the light will be yours." He didn't speak of illness or age or anything sad, only of time and how it moves like the tides, whether we want it to or not. That evening, Eli climbed the tower alone. He lit the flame, polished the glass, and watched the beam stretch out across the water. He thought of the men who came before him, whose hands held this same railing, whose hearts listened to this same sea. The journal lay open beside him, ink still drying on the page. He had written, "The light doesn't belong to me, but I belong to it. And so long as it shines, I will be here, down below." The keeper sat in his old wooden chair, his eyes closed, breathing slow, his hand resting on the tin whistle. He hadn't played in weeks. The wind moved gently through the cracks, but the fire was warm, and the kettle still hummed on the stove. Far out at sea, a ship sounded its horn. Its crew would never see Eli. or know his name, but they would see his light, and that was enough. As the night deepened and the stars blinked awake, Eli watched the beam pass across the waves again and again, like a heartbeat, like a promise. The tower stood quiet, steady, and strong, and inside it a boy had become a keeper, not with ceremony, but with care. And in the endless hush between one wave and the next, a new chapter began. Without a word, the lighthouse keeper of Maine, in the year 1890, was no longer just a boy from inland hills. He was now the light itself, always watching, always waiting, always home. Thank you for listening. If this quiet journey touched your heart, please consider liking, subscribing, and letting us know where you're listening from. Until next time, rest easy beneath the soft glow of history's gentle flame.